and I had a great conversation with Shelton Benjamin. I was just on with Paz, our dear friend Paz, John Paz, and Neil Koloff, because Shoot Pro, we're going to be airing on the NBC affiliate out of Charleston, South Carolina, for some specials. We're going to have Frank Shamrock and Pat are going to go in the studio and do a sit-down interview. And then Neil Koloff is actually going to be competing in the fall for Shoot Pro. The program director there, his name is Adam Helms, and he also runs Battleground, which is a pro wrestling company. And Neil, I was talking to Shelton Benjamin about Neil. Neil was a stud wrestler in South Carolina. I coached for a team that was opposite Neil, but I also coached with Neil's college roommate, Steve Volponi, and his college teammate, and they wrestled together at Anderson College, and they were both national qualifiers. Neil was a two-time state champion, and he's a beast. I mean, we recounted and I think this is up on Hannibal TV, actually, the time that Stephan Bonner and I were hosting the pre-show for 864 Fighting Championships in South Carolina, when the ring girls are there in the ring, and Bonner shot on Jeff, shot a double leg on Neil. We call him Jeff because he's Jeff Lewis Neil, but his pro wrestling name is Neil Koloff. And it's still talked about how well Neil defended that takedown. And he's a stud, and he's well known in South Carolina because he's on the radio. That's why we were interviewing him for Fox Carolina on that pre-show, because he was the shock jock back then for years, but also a stud amateur wrestler and a pro wrestler. He's been a pro wrestler for years. So we're welcoming him to the CDB Channel 2 in Charleston for a feature match coming up in the fall. So we got all kinds of cool stuff going on with Shoot Pro. But I had a long talk with Shelton Benjamin about South Carolina wrestling and about his dear friend Neil, because Shelton is a legend in South Carolina. Of course, he went on to wrestle for University of Minnesota, but he wrestled out of Orangeburg, and he's very close friends with Neil, and he really dug Shoot Pro. Shelton loved it. And of course, Hulk Hogan called him Benjamin Shelton a few times. Hannibal, did you see that?
Yeah, he's claiming that they're good friends and calling him Benjamin, like he had it confused, and I think Shelton kind of got offended by that.
Oh, he responded and said that Hogan was never his friend. And I love the Hulkster. I mean, I'm a Hulkamaniac going way back. But I thought that was funny because we're talking with Shelton about doing the broadcasting for that match, for that Shoot Pro match for the TV show coming up. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff going on. It was an awesome weekend. You saw with Nature Boy Ric Flair. Wish him nothing but the best. But there was
he wasn't looking too good. I have to say, somebody commented that he wasn't, and then someone else, well, he looks pretty good for 76. My dad's 77. And he looks a hell of a lot better than that. And I have a workout partner sometimes who's 74. I know he's like been through some battles, but like he was not looking healthy.
I have to put that in perspective, though, just as an intellectual and so forth. The average male born today in America will live to be 74.5 years. So if he's on this side of the dirt, to me, he's doing pretty well. And again, I have no animosity towards Rick. I wish him nothing but the best. But Jason was right there. And the lovely Mel, who is a beautiful young lady that Jason and I met, and I ended up spending the weekend with, beautiful woman. She encouraged me to make up with Rick, and I tried to. And I'll tell you, Jason was right there. He saw what happened.
I was videotaping it.
Yeah, he was taping it as it happened. And so Mel was like, go over there. And, I didn't want to do it, but I walked over, and Dave Fetterman, who was his handler and bodyguard, Rick was talking to him, shaking his head, and he stood right there, and he blocked Rick, and he said, he wants absolutely nothing to do with you.
No, he
And
said he didn't have time for you.
yeah, he didn't. That's what it was. He says Rick has no time for you. That's what it was. And so I said, fine. I know the animosity he had. Kevin Sullivan told me, Andrew Anderson told me when I went on their podcast. Rick called me after I went on their podcast and swore at me, said he was going to kill me. We all know that. But the King, I'm down here in Florida, enjoying my golden years, having a great time. Jason and I have a blast down here. We recently went bow fishing. I'm trying to get Jason to go back out with me Friday night and go bow fishing. We enjoy life. I have nothing but kind words for the Nature Boy, and I wish him nothing but the best.
Very interesting. Was that your first experience at a wrestling autograph convention, Jason? Oh, can you guys hear me?
Jason, you there?
Well, you tell me, how did Jason like the experience, Matt? Well,
he was with a 7'4" Puerto Rican pro wrestler, and did pictures with him and a cool video with him. And I think Jason had a blast at the convention. He had a nice chat with Kurt Angle about their similar experiences with their necks. Jason actually won a fight where he broke his neck. Kurt Angle, of course, famously made that comeback, and Jason made a comeback after a broken neck. So they had a great chat. We had a great chat with Hacksaw Jim Duggan. He loves Shoot Pro Wrestling. We had a great chat with Leah James, the gorgeous British wrestler. We spent a lot of time with her. She loved Shoot Pro Wrestling. We were going around. We were showing everybody the highlights, the videos, what Shoot Pro is all about, talking to the dude, the bro, rather, Matt Riddle, talking to Bobby Lashley, talking to Hacksaw, who was a New York State wrestling champion. And he and I were talking about the upstate South Carolina and hunting up there. And he's an old hunter from Glens Falls, New York, talking about how much it's different it is than the city. And we had a great time. We really enjoyed ourselves, and we got the word out about Shoot Pro Wrestling. We were looking for Eric Bischoff, but he was not there. He either no-showed or he might have been there on Sunday. But yeah, we had an awesome time. And I want to say, Jason, and I want to explain what Jason's role is going to be with Shoot Pro Wrestling. Shoot Pro Wrestling is all about the exciting matches, win by pin or submission, 3 5-minute rounds. We've got some great episodes coming out in the next few weeks here on the Hannibal TV that are going to include some coaching clips from our Presidente Pat Milicic, Frank Shamrock, and the King of Pins, Wade Chalice, from our big Vegas con and tournaments, and some fast-paced matches. Amazing fast-paced matches that I called with Jake and WWE Hall of Famer, the living legend Larry Zbyszko, great broadcaster, great amateur wrestler himself, as well as pro wrestler. And everything's going great, for Shoot Pro. But Jason approached Jake and I, and he had some great insight. He said, have you ever thought of having a Masters division for Shoot Pro? And we put Jason in charge of that Masters division. Now, these will not be televised matches on our TV shows. We want to give the young guys an opportunity to shine. We have LFA competitors, LFA champions. We have NCAA wrestlers. We have fight to win grappling champions. Our athletes come from the MMA cage, the amateur wrestling mat, and the grappling stage. And we want to keep the young bucks out there for our television shows. But what Jason's going to be doing for us is running some masters tournaments. And I know, Hannibal, yourself as a national champion in freestyle wrestling and also in grappling, you're very familiar with the masters division. For the older folks, the silver-haired folks, the silver foxes like myself and Jason that still want to get out there and compete. And we want to give them that opportunity. So Jason's going to be heading that. But again, those won't be broadcasted. We won't have commentary. They'll just be like tournaments moving forward in that regard. So Jason, what are your thoughts, man, with Shoot Pro Wrestling? Welcome to the team.
Thanks, Matt. I think it's great. It's jiu-jitsu has the senior masters divisions. I think a lot of guys that are older would like to get out there and compete with pins and submissions with Shoot Pro.
Awesome.
For sure.
We have a lot. I've noticed a lot of people talking about Goldberg coming back. You're talking about the older people. I mean, they're bringing him back at 58 and paying him a lot of money. King, what do you think about him coming back into wrestling? And so supposedly in the next month or so, he's going to have his retirement match. Do you think he should just go in there and squash Gunther? Because I look at Gunther's legs and they're so thin. They're like they're just asking for a double leg takedown.
I got to tell you, I don't really watch the current professional wrestling. I was just talking about this on Paz's show, and Neil and I were talking about it. And I was talking to Aaliyah James about it. I actually showed her my highlights from my tenure in the world of pro wrestling. And I don't really watch it because I like the wrestling. I brought guys from the mat, like we were just talking about in the previous show, like Steve Volponi, one of my best friends in South Carolina, who I cornered in MMA and coached with in amateur wrestling. He was Neil's teammate and roommate at Anderson College. To have wrestling matches, to go in like Stephan Bonn or Phil Baroni, Kamal Shalroos, they had a blast in pro wrestling because that's how I got into pro wrestling. I got into pro wrestling way back before the Dead Sea was still sick. Back in the 90s, Akari Judo, one of my buddies who was coaching with a rival high school, was judo with me, and he told me he was going into pro wrestling, and he took me around as his opponent. And I love the wrestling, and I love to give fans, make fans believe. And like I always said, is there's not a damn thing I do in that ring that I can't do to each and every one of you fat slobs that's paying to see me. And that's was the reality. And that's the pro wrestling that I like, the old school. And the pro wrestling today is so gymnastic, bringing in a guy that's nearly 60 years old. I mean, come on, man. And a guy really with Goldberg that really couldn't wrestle anyway. I mean, you saw how he got exposed years ago in that match that he had with Regal. When Regal actually went to wrestle him, he couldn't wrestle. So I'd
like to see them in the final, in Goldberg's final match, because I think Goldberg has some animosity towards that.
Well, I'd like to see Regal stretch him, and that's the thing, that hurts professional wrestling when they bring these celebrities in or they bring these old guys back. I mean, I think they ought to do it like the old Carney days, and they like Larry used to do, and he's told us the stories. Is get guys from the fans in the ring and give them money, to see how long they can last with the wrestler. Pay them by every minute they can last, and stretch them and show them that it's the real deal, that it's wrestling. I mean, professional wrestling to me needs to have that integrity. Shoot pro wrestling, totally different animal. 100% shoot. Again, athletes from the MMA cage, the amateur wrestling mat, the grappling stage. They have no idea what a work even is. So asking about Goldberg, no. Bringing him in there, I mean, pushing 60 years old, no. I mean, it's kind of like when the Nature Boy was out there, in his 50s. No, I mean, leave it to the young guys if they want to have a Masters division like we're having with Shoot Pro. But no, there's no time. There's really no place for that on television, in my opinion, Hannibal.
The problem is the young guys aren't drawing anymore, so they need. I think you may have mentioned it. That'd be like, or maybe it was one of my other friends in the Attitude Era, bringing back somebody
Oh
like
yeah,
from the 1960s.
exactly. It's like if they would have brought Buddy Rogers back. Say during the Hulkamania era or that era right after Hulkamania, they would have brought Buddy Rogers back in or Lou Thez back in. And even as an old man, Lou or Vern Gagne would have been able to stretch all those guys. So I think that it's ridiculous. And it just shows you don't see the T-shirts anymore. You used to see the Hulkamania T-shirts. I grew up as a Hulkamaniac. That's why I got into amateur wrestling. I got into wrestling, competing in wrestling in 7th grade because I was a Hulkamaniac, brother. You don't see the T-shirts. You remember the NWO era, the Stone Cold T-shirts, the Attitude Era. I think professional wrestling has lost that sizzle, that mystique. We are putting the genie back in the bottle with Shoot Pro Wrestling because we're giving people the same rules, but in real matches. And, I wish those guys nothing but the best, of course, just like I wish Hogan and Bischoff, who are using freestyle. I just said this on the other show. I think a lot of fans don't understand. And Hannibal, more than anybody as a national champion in freestyle, how freestyle has changed. I competed in freestyle back in the 90s. Freestyle of today is more like sumo, right, Hannibal?
Yeah, there's not a lot of action, and it's about getting your points and keeping your points. As far as your events, do you have any events coming up, or is it a situation where you've got a bunch of footage from past events where you're just going to release the footage?
So
Because I've
here's
had a lot of fans ask about that. Where is this
Oh
footage
yeah,
coming from?
we have over 30 matches that are being edited into episodes now. Then and you and I talked about this when we had Jake on a week ago. When you were on there with Jake and I, and we have 6 to 8 episodes that are going to start dropping within the next few weeks. So we're way ahead of the game when it comes to matches and episodes and footage. And then upcoming, we have Jenny Santana is going to be hosting our women's tournament in Las Vegas. And then Kamal Shalarus, who I was just with here in Florida a few weeks ago, the grand opening of his gym, which is coming at the end of the summer. We're going to have another tournament and camps out there as well. And there's some other stuff coming up that I'm sworn to secrecy that I can't say, but it is extremely, extremely exciting. So yeah, we're way ahead of the game with content. And like we say on all these shows, Eric Bischoff, and I don't know if we mentioned this. I think Jake and I mentioned this to you. Eric Bischoff was at a Shoot Pro event at Crusher Fest in Wisconsin back in 2021. He was front row and he was interviewed in the ring. So Eric, Hulk Hogan, and Izzy Martinez, who's followed scientific wrestling for the last 9 years, are all well acquainted with scientific wrestling and Shoot Pro Wrestling. Jake's been the cutting edge, the man for camps for the last 25 years. And he's had Shoot Pro Wrestling for the last few years. We're really amping it up now with the TV shows, TV in Charleston, like I mentioned, South Florida, Vegas, Hannibal TV, Action Martial Arts. We have our contract. We're going to start airing on Triller TV. And then we've got some other stuff that I say I'm sworn to secrecy that I can't disclose at this time, but there's a lot going on for Shoot Pro Wrestling.
Jason, I don't know if you've ever run into Ben Askren, but have either of you guys heard that he's fighting for his life right now from a staph infection. And Jason, have you ever had a staph infection? Because this seems very serious. It's been a couple days now. He's been in the ICU, and from what I understand, he hasn't pulled out of it, at least as of a couple hours ago.
Yeah, I wish him all the best and prayers to him and his family. And fortunately, I've never had a staph infection. I've had other infections, mat infection, ringworm, and stuff like that. But no, not a staph infection. I never have had.
Yeah, I want to say, thoughts and prayers for sure. Praying for Ben Askren to make a full recovery. And Hannibal, some of my favorite shows with you over the last 10 years have been with the American Psycho Stephan Bonner, RIP. And Stephan got a horrible staph infection in the hospital when he was in that long hospital stay when he had the broken back. And I really wish that he makes that Ben makes a full recovery. I think there's a lot of things to be positive about. He's in great shape, and from what I understand, he had pneumonia. But I pray for Ben Askren that he can fight through this.
I understand from Dave Meltzer, because he was known as a pretty good talker in his MMA days. He did better in Strikeforce and Bellator than he did in UFC because he wasn't much of a striker. He pretty much got by on his grappling. But he was going to be one of the main guys for Hogan's Real American Wrestling. He had signed with them, but they liked that he was a big talker. Do you guys have anyone from your roster that you think is going to be able to capture the audience?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And I say just 2 words: stay tuned, because these episodes that are coming out in the next few weeks are going to captivate the fans like nothing else. We get some real stars, and like Larry Zbyszko says, stars in the making. We are going to be making stars. Love Ben Askren. Love the way he competed in MMA. That's why he's still lucid. That was the way that I competed. That was the way that the guys I coached competed, was to use your grappling and minimize the damage. Ben Askren is an absolute legend. I did see an interview with him and Eric Bischoff, and he was going to be part of Real American Freestyle. I would think at his age, it was not going to be as a competitor. I would think that he would be more as an executive or on the broadcasting team or a host. But I hope he can make it back to Real American Freestyle, and I hope he makes a full recovery.
Someone on here mentioning they encountered Lou Thesz and he was a jerk when he tried to get his autograph. I've heard that he was kind of cantankerous.
Yeah.
I've heard Dusty Rhodes was like that too. If you ever asked for his autograph,
I know a lot about Lou Thesz through my longtime coach and mentor, the late Billy Wicks. He was really tight with Lou, really good friends with Lou, and I think Lou just didn't have Pops, Billy Wicks, Vern Gagne. And I've heard that about Bob Roop. They just didn't have a lot of time for people. You hear the same thing about Billy Robinson and Carl Gotch. Like Jake says, Carl Gotch just didn't suffer fools. So I think that's probably what it was. But Lou was a great, a great wrestler, shoot wrestler. So I'd say, he's on my Mount Rushmore. I'll tell you my Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, and I'll explain why it's what it is. Starts out with Frank Gotch, because from the shoot era, because Frank Gotch and George Hackenschmidt drew the biggest, huge crowd when wrestling was the thing. The sport. It was before football and baseball, when it was wrestling and boxing at the turn of the century. Next on my Mount Rushmore is Gorgeous George, because Gorgeous George, he was a shooter, came out of the Carnies, but Gorgeous George was the ultimate entertainer. He wasn't just the biggest star in wrestling in his day, he was the biggest star of early television. Third on my Mount Rushmore is Lou Thesz, because he was the quintessential traveling champion, territory champion. And fourth on my Mount Rushmore is the brother, Hulk Hogan, because Hulkamania era, there's never been anything like it. And then he transcended into becoming a heel in the NWO era during that Attitude Era period. So yeah, Lou is on my Mount Rushmore. And what would be your Mount Rushmore, Hannibal, of pro wrestling?
I haven't really thought about it that much, but I would say the one thing for the Hogan era is they would announce a sellout when it was a sellout. Now they're going to call it a sellout no matter what now. And that annoys me that it's actually reported as a sellout, and then when you look up the actual size of the arena, it's like 12,000 people more. But they're like, oh well, we curtained it off, so it's a sellout for our setup. But
that's pretty common. Like I used to broadcast for Strike Off in Virginia, the MMA company, which was a great company. They were on TV. We had the TV deal in Comcast, and we used to run at the Eagle Bank where UFC ran, right? And this kind of bleeds into the next part that Jason and I want to talk about. And that's what they used to do for TV. They used to drop the curtains, the big curtains, because we couldn't fill the building, but you didn't want to look like there were a bunch of empty seats, but the next thing that we wanted to talk about, and the main reason we wanted to come on, Hannibal, was to talk about regional MMA, not the UFC or Bellator, but regional MMA, and kind of give fans a unique perspective. I mean, Jason, in addition to being the submission master and fighting into the UFC, he fought a ton of times on regional MMA shows, and he was a promoter. He promoted a ton of shows, and he knows the Midwest extremely well. To a lesser degree, I know the Southeast. I was kind of a jack of all trades in MMA. I competed, I cornered, I broadcasted, I ring announced. I did pretty much everything. And I was a matchmaker. And that was kind of the piece that we wanted to talk about, in that regard, kind of give fans a perspective. And I'd say give fans a perspective of how regional MMA differs from the UFC and how similar it is to boxing in one sense, and also perhaps how similar it is to the early days of professional wrestling. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Reinhardt to tell us about his experiences with regional MMA in the Midwest.
Well, would you like to know?
Well, we were talking about a lot of the stories. One thing for sure, and I did this when I was doing the booking, the matchmaking. If you were going to look a fighter up, a lot of their matches, a lot of their fights were not recorded. I always looked at mixedmartialarts.com as opposed to SureDog. And this was, things might have changed. There may be other, ways to look guys up now. But that was because even mixedmartialarts.com didn't capture everyone's fight. But SureDog would leave a lot of fights out. And that's what, you were talking about, Jason.
Yeah, man. The promoters back then, there was no commissioners. Heck, there was barely weigh-ins. Your opponent would change 3 and 4 times in one night sometimes, and a lot of times the guys that you would fight, they would have a lot more fights on their record than what's actually showing, because the promoters weren't required to send in results. Now, I had a great manager, so my manager really tried to get all of my fights registered and recorded. Some of them didn't get there, but almost a lot of them did.
Yeah, and also in the Midwest, Hannibal, there's a lot of, and this is what Jason and I talked about privately, a lot of stories you hear about the Midwest, and I never was involved in Midwestern MMA, but of a lot of the shadiness and a lot of the corruption that went on, and not to call guys out or speak.
Give us some examples.
Well, I mean, I'll throw it to Jason, but just throw a name out there, and not that he's the only guy, but worked fights. Travis Fulton.
Yeah, a lot of times he would, he's got a lot of fights on his record. I fought on many shows that he was on, and a lot of times he would bring his own guys and fight them three and four, two, three, four times in one night. Different students of his that he would bring to the shows and fight, and then they would get recorded on his record.
Yeah, and that
Oh
was
wow.
he wasn't the only guy to do that. I mean, obviously, I mean, I'm not gonna hold my breath on someone else that did that a lot, but that was it was done. I mean, a guy I think everybody knows that did that quite a bit too was Shannon Rich. In the Midwest. And some of the guys that you just look up his record, like Travis Fulton, like that he fought Travis Fulton multiple times. So that was what you always heard about in the Midwest. And that's kind of Hannibal. That's kind of like the old days of early pro wrestling when it was evolving into a work. And I thought that your fans might find that interesting. And were you aware of that, Hannibal?
I definitely have been aware that there's some people fighting their students and stuff, and that there's been some works here and there, but not to the extent of multiple fights on one show. Because if there's any legitimate commission, I mean that's going to open up a whole different form of sanctioning.
Sure.
Well, Hannibal,
Go ahead.
they're Hannibal, they're there wasn't sanctioning for a lot of fights back then. There wasn't sanctioning bodies. I mean, heck, man, we used to. Are you there, Hannibal?
Oh yeah, I'm here. I'm just taking off because I ain't as pretty as you guys, so I'm giving the fans a break from my face.
There was times where the promoter, the cops, would locate our venue, and then we would go to a secret venue and fight to try to avoid the cops so they wouldn't shut us down. That was right about the time where the state wanted to get their nose into everything, but they weren't quite there yet. And they were trying to get it regulated, but they weren't quite there. And there'd be times where promoters would change the venue at the last second and have a second location without the cops knowing. So there was a lot of times where the
How would the
commissions would.
crowd get there, or would it be just without a crowd at that point? Like when you change
You'd
location
be
at the last
surprised,
minute.
man. The crowd would. Yeah, that's a great question. The crowd would make it, man. That's Warrior Concepts. My friend Scott Ward, he would have to change the venue and at the last second, and for some reason the crowd would definitely find the venue. The word would get out quickly.
Wow, and the cops just at that point did they just not care and didn't look too hard? Because that's got to be nerve wracking as a fighter. You're already nervous enough fighting, and now you got to worry about getting arrested.
Oh, it was very stressful, to be honest with you. And there was yeah, and I mean, like, there were weigh-ins to a point, but not really strict way. There were a little bit, but you would go and your opponent would be so much heavier, and I mean, you had a choice either to fight or not to fight, and you trained so hard, so you fought.
And that's in Hannibal. That's what happened back in the day. And when my dear friend Art Davey was the man running the UFC, UFC was supposed to run in New York, and they something happened with Extreme. They violate. I don't remember the whole. I used to know the story, but they ended up moving to Dothan, Alabama, last minute. Literally like 2 days before they moved the show to Dothan, Alabama, from New York. So it even happened in the early days of UFC. But Hannibal in
I mean,
the in the
go ahead. Sorry, Matt.
no, you get it. I'm sorry.
No, no. I mean, sometimes the venue would change a couple nights before the event. When the heat would come down. But I remember one specific time that it changed the day of the day of the show. But sometimes it would change a couple days before, and then the word would get out. You had a lot of teams that competed, so a lot of teams and fans of fighters, that the word would spread where the new location was going to be. I'll try and avoid the cops.
Yeah. And in the South, the Southeast, what was and probably still is far more prevalent is when you have regional shows. Quite often, those shows are being promoted by a school, by an MMA school, and they're
Yeah.
used to pad the records of the fighters. So, in my tenure when I was, competing in matchmaking, I was involved with that in the sense of we used to say fresh meat. Like we had a couple guys in the early days in South Carolina that were studs. I'm not going to mention them by name, but because when I tell you, um, we were padding up their records to get them to the next level. One ended up going to Bellator, the other kind of got a rude awakening in the Ultimate Fighter, trying to get in the house. But when I say fresh meat, Hannibal is like boxing, like tomato cans, where there weren't works, but you could bet your house on who was going to win. And I had one guy that was an all-American wrestler that I used to match make for, and Hannibal will appreciate this when I talk about, because it's like pro wrestling, where he would carry opponents. And one time he even asked me, he goes, when do you want me to finish them? Like, what round do you want me to finish them? And that was back when they were doing the boxing and MMA combo shows in the early days, where the matches were taking place in the boxing ring. So I mean, that's kind of Hannibal. That sort of has that parallel with like the old school professional wrestling, and I think a lot of fans don't fully understand that. And I've talked about with what we're doing with Shoot Pro Wrestling, but also the roots of mixed martial arts and how Japanese organizations like Fujinari Gumi and Pancras were the precursors, and Shuto. My old coach and dear friend and co-author Eric Paulson was world champion in Shuto. Those organizations all came out of professional wrestling. Shuto was Satoru Sayama, Tiger Mask and Karl Gotch, and Suzuki and Funaki started Pancras, and Frank Shamrock and I had a great conversation with that in our interview out at the Shoot Pro CatchCon event. So I think your listeners will be fascinated by that, because you're a combat sports channel, but you do so much with pro wrestling to understand the roots of mixed martial arts, but also the parallels to boxing when it comes to padding records, right? And Hannibal, I'm sure it's something that I think your listeners would find quite fascinating.
And I know it happens on amateur shows, which it happens all the time in Canada on amateur shows, where they'll put people in the cage that
Florida
have
used
no
to be all
business being
pro.
in the cage.
Yeah, Florida used to.
We used at Militich Fighting Systems. He used to fight smoker shows on Wednesdays. We would get done training and go to the bar and sign up. It was all amateur. Well, you'd sign up. You never knew you were going to fight. Just fight guys off the street,
Yeah, and Florida used to be all pro. Like everybody had to get paid. They didn't allow amateur. But in the amateur, what a lot of the shows do that I think fans don't understand is they make the fighters sell tickets, right? So the fighters will make money selling tickets because they get to keep a piece off of the ticket price. But that's how they fill their shows, because unless it's like a UFC, a lot of times smaller regional shows are a lot of um, guys who train with the guys competing and their friends and family, right? So you want to, when you're promoting, like the promoter, when I was doing the matchmaking, the promoter always wanted to book local guys who could sell tickets. And when I say sell tickets, I'm not talking about putting butts in seats because of their name value. I'm talking about physically have to sell tickets in order to fight on that show. You'd have to sell tickets in order to fight on that show.
Yeah, and that
Yeah,
still
and hey,
happens.
I mean, there were weigh-ins, but it wasn't like it is today. Very strict, and it was very loose weigh-ins, and but there definitely wasn't the commissions that you see today at all. But keep in mind, back then it was called no holds barred a lot of times, until MMA got the name MMA, but it was called NHB, no holds barred.
Yeah, that's true. Very interesting. You got to have some stories from those smoker shows from Militich Fighting Systems where some people just got their ass handed to them, or were there also some cases where you're going in there thinking you're going to destroy some jabroni and then he ends up giving a good fight to one of the pro fighters?
I never really saw that too much, man. I mean, Matt Hughes would be in there. He'd go in there and win and, fight, and Jens Pulver and all the guys. And yeah, I never seen a guy really do good against a pro fighter, though. I got to tell you.
Remember
Yeah.
that show, Hannibal? Do you remember that show called God damn, I'm spacing. The one on MTV.
The bullies, where the bullies
Yeah,
had to
Bully
fight the pro
Beatdown.
fighter,
Remember
yeah.
Bully Beatdown? That
Yeah.
was Mayhem Miller. Yeah, that was Mayhem Miller. That Bully Beatdown show is kind of like that was wild. That was like a Carney style show. Jason, did you ever watch that show on MTV with Mayhem Miller called
Cool.
Bully Beatdown? Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That was what it was like a lot in back in the day in the South in MMA when I'm talking about fresh meat, and nothing against the competitors. It's not that they didn't train, but they just weren't at the level. I mean, South Carolina, we had 2 deaths. I was actually at both of them. One guy died right at my feet when I was part of cornering Matt Covey, and he never fought in Mount Pleasant. And they stopped the show, and this is what kind of started to turn me off to MMA. Was the fans were all pissed off and started throwing shit and fighting in the crowd because they stopped the show. Stopped the show because the guy died. Like, and then the other one, Kamal was cornering with me on that show, and that show was in the upstate in South Carolina in the Greenville area. And I knew that Mark Mills, who's a good friend of mine, Columbia Martial Arts CMA, he was one of his fighters. And this guy stood about 6'5" and had a neck like this, like my finger. And he fought, a stocky little wrestler, and the guy took him down. The guy shot a blast double on him, took him down. And his head was literally like a bobble doll bouncing off the mat. And the referee just let it keep going. And this is like, say, from back in the day, some of these referees didn't know what the hell they were doing. And the guy died right there in the cage. So, I mean, I'll tell you, and I've told Jason this is what I love about Shoot Pro. Shoot Pro Wrestling, check out shootprowrestling.com, is that we bring you the action without the CTE and TBI issues. Because I mean, really 3 of my best friends, 2 are dead, and 1 is in a Mexican prison, and I attribute that to the CTE.
Oh, you're not like Steve Austin that says it's a myth?
Say what's a myth? CTE?
Steve Austin said that on the Vince McMahon documentary, that CTE is a myth.
There's no way. I mean, come on, man. I mean, it used to be just called Punch Drunk. Like Eric Paulson used to have this shirt. I still have it. Eric made this shirt called Punch Drunk Killer. And it was an old dude, an old fighter that was like, it was a wild face. Eric used to make some really cool shirts. But I mean, they used to call it Punchy But I mean, it's sad. I mean, I know guys talking about the Southeast. I know guys that I used to train with that took way too many fights. I'm not going to say his name. Pat called one of his fights when he fought in Louisiana, who are fairly young guys, now 40 or early 40s, who can't hold a job even moving grocery carts at the store. I mean, their brains are completely gone. So I'm not a big fan anymore of the striking and of MMA or bare knuckle or any of that. I'm all in for shoot pro wrestling, baby.
I remember a famous one too that actually made news back in the no holds barred day, where some guy was on top, knocked the guy out, and then the referee let him slap the guy awake and knock him out again. And I was like, the referee actually allowed that, and the crowd's going nuts
There
for
were some horrible referees back in the day. I mean, it's just some terrible referees that would, and it's the ground strikes that are the most dangerous. And it's interesting, and this is something that I think will be fascinating to fans, because Jason just did a tournament yesterday for one of his students that was really old school, kind of like old school taekwondo or old school karate, where there were, because there used to be points fighting, and then it evolved into full contact karate, and then that's how kickboxing came to be in the U.S. Well, wrestling in America is the opposite. So in striking, there became less and less regulations. Well, in wrestling, if you study the history of amateur wrestling in America, and this is in our book, the book Eric and I did, Hugo Optopolik in the 1920s he was the head of AAU, which ran amateur wrestling at the time, created the rules for scholastic wrestling. And if you read that passage, it's also in Mike Chapman's book, From Gotch to Gable. He chronicles it really well. He explains how there will no longer be any choke pins. There will no longer be any twisting arm locks. There will no longer be any toe holds. All the submissions were taken out of scholastic wrestling to make it safer for the wrestler. So wrestling was watered down, whereas the striking became more open, right? So with shoot pro wrestling, we truly are going back to the future. Jason is a great jiu-jitsu guy. Well, the Gracie family in Brazil, they were trained by Count Koma, Mitsuya Maeda. Pat and I always talk about this on the show because it's a fascinating history. Count Koma, he competed in the 1909 Alhambra big catch wrestling tournament, but we also chronicle in the book all the other catch wrestling rules matches that he had. And why did he train the Gracies? Well, he trained the Gracies because the Gracie family was actually originally Scottish, and they used to run the carnivals in Brazil. And Maeda, Count Koma, was a take on all comers carnival wrestler, and that was the old CarnyCon where, you call guys in from the crowd. That's who trained the Gracie. So it's all roots of the same tree. So with shoot pro wrestling, not only are we bringing back the pin because it's more exciting, we're also bringing wrestling back to its roots. So pretty fascinating stuff, I think, for your listeners. And when I go on the podcasts, I know it's different with you, Hannibal, because you are a national champion in freestyle, great amateur wrestler. You also won a national championship in submission grappling. So you understand what we're talking about. But when we go on a lot of the pro wrestling podcasts, it's amazing how low their IQ is when it comes to the history of their own history, the history of wrestling and professional wrestling and American scholastic wrestling. So one of the other things that we're doing with Shoot Pro, and Jake's been doing this for years with scientific wrestling, Paulson and I did it when we wrote our book, is to educate the wrestling fans.
One thing that annoys the hell out of me and why I don't like long pro wrestling matches is people that think a good technical pro wrestler is a good actual wrestler. There might be some that were both, but like for instance, Chris Benoit, people think he was a good wrestler. I've never heard of him ever wrestling.
No, I don't think
amateur
he.
or grappling. Like,
I don't
to
think he
me,
did. I think in his matches with Kurt Angle, he was just a good athlete that could follow. And through the years when I did pro wrestling, most of my opponents, I brought my opponents, and they were from amateur wrestling. There were guys I coached with that I had the best matches with, or guys from MMA, like Kamal and Bonner and Baroni. And what we would always say is, if I went to a promoter to do pro wrestling, like there was this guy at APW that I loved because he was a little guy, but he was a wrestling coach. I would always say, you got to give me somebody that can follow me, because if they can't follow me, the match ain't going to be good, because I'm just going to chew their ass up. And there was a funny story that Chuck Sloan told here on the show with Old School Shooters. Chuck used to corner fighters with me. He was a good amateur wrestler himself. And he remembered a match where the kid was crying and saying that I shot on him, crying in the back. And all I did was wrestle him, and he couldn't follow me. So I just cradled him up and pinned him. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you look at that, like Dory Funk Jr., Jack Briscoe matches, right? I don't think Dory Funk Jr. I mean, Jack Briscoe was a D1 national champion. I don't think Dory Funk Jr. had much of a background either, but he was kind
no.
of like
His dad
Coach
would have
Benoit.
taught him, though. His dad was a shooter. He would have taught him.
Yeah.
I think they shot in the barn all the time.
Yeah, so I mean, he
So,
may have had some shoot background, but
yeah.
Benoit, and I think in Benoit's defense, not in his defense over the horrible things he did, Benoit spent years in the New Japan dojo, so I'm sure he learned how to shoot there. Or he would have gotten shoot up. And
Yeah.
that's the way it should be. In professional wrestling, and I mean, I just don't watch it today. But I did go to a match that Tony DiNucci had, a show that Tony DiNucci had here in South Carolina, right in that town where I live in. That was awesome, man. I mean, those guys, I talked to a lot of the kids, and a lot of the kids were from the jiu-jitsu school here, and they had some really good matches. But I just don't like all the acrobatics, that they do now.
Real shooters in the past 20 years, someone's asking, I would say Shelton Benjamin, Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle,
Charlie Haas.
Steve Blackman, Charlie. Yeah, I've actually wrestled amateur Charlie Haas. We went even, but Shelton outpointed me. I will say that I did wrestle. I did amateur wrestle Shelton too.
Well, do you know that Shelton Benjamin, when he was with Marty Morgan at University of Minnesota, he was Brock's coach.
He would beat Brock, apparently, I heard.
Yeah, he would beat Brock, and that's what everybody says, that he would beat Brock. Marty Morgan said that. He was the coach from University of Minnesota. He wrestled before Brock was their heavyweight. He was their heavyweight, and then he was Brock's coach, and they said he would wipe the mat with Brock. So yeah, he was a beast. But he's a South Carolina, and in coaching in South Carolina, when I was talking to Shelton the other day with Jason at the Fan Fest, I told him, I said, man, you remind me so much of a kid we had at Dutch Fork, Tim Dudley. And he looks just like Dudley. Dudley wrestled for University of Nebraska, and then he made it to the D1 finals, was barely outpointed. He wrestled Dave Taylor at Midlands, and it was a really close match. And Shelton Benjamin was on that level. He's considered to be one of the top 3 greatest wrestlers ever to come out of South Carolina.
Lashley, we'd have to throw him in there too. He's definitely a tough customer. Someone on here is asking, this is a good question for both of you. The people that say bare knuckle is safer than UFC and MMA. I don't know if bare knuckle is licensed everywhere, but it's becoming popular. Someone I know is doing it this month in Texas. But to me, they're not getting paid enough for how badly their faces are getting messed up.
That's a controversial subject. Some would say that the glove, it spreads the punch out versus the bare knuckle. It spreads the punch out over the brain versus the no glove, where it's knuckle, it's bone on bone. So a lot of the cuts are superficial. I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just saying that's what the argument is. Sometimes that they say that the punch, it's pinpointed, where it's, you see a lot of damage, but the punch in MMA is spread out and jars the brain more because of the glove. Again, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that that's what people say.
That's what people say about boxing too, because the heavier gloves are supposed to be more dangerous because you can land a lot more shots and with the padding. I don't know. I mean, I'm not familiar, and I don't watch the bare knuckle boxing. It makes me sick to see females do it. I mean, I'm a hypocrite in this regard because I did corner a couple female fighters, but I don't like the women's MMA. And Bonner, incidentally, didn't either. He wouldn't. He would not call. This is interesting. When I was broadcasting with Bonner with 864 for Fox Carolina, he made it clear to the promoters that he would not do not put any girls, he called them girls, do not put any girls fights on here. I won't be part of the show.
Then the last thing we'll talk about to wrap up, someone else was bringing up Luthez. Do you think a lot of these people that are getting paid to train would even have done wrestling back in the territory days when you would run into guys like Thez and like you're going to get in there with him and he's legitimately going to rough you up, and that's just part of your job. You have to suck up and take it, or you're not going to get booked anymore because they wanted you to be tough in the old days because it was still...
That's how pro wrestling always was. I don't know if it's like that anymore, but when the Undertaker, like he was telling Rogan, I mean, when he went into pro wrestling, Buzz Sawyer, who Dan Severn,
I think that was before his $2.5 million a year contract. By the way, they signed him after that to keep his mouth shut.
Yeah, when he was talking about Buzz, and Buzz was a stud. Like I say, Severn barely outpointed him at nationals. He roughed up, and this is what they always used to do. And they had Larry do this to guys. If you came in, they had Hogan. Hogan got his leg broken by Matsuda. The whole idea with pro wrestling was, to keep people out. And Buzz beat the hell out of Undertaker. He says, he cross-faced him and broke his nose and just had his way with him. And that's what pro wrestling is always supposed to was always supposed to be, was the toughest guys. I mean, Frank Shamrock talks about that, in Japan, like with UWFI, which predated Pancrase. I mean, the matches on camera were close works, but in order to get on the show, you had to shoot in the matches. And I think that they should bring that back. And I mean, what we're doing with Shoot Pro Wrestling is a whole nother level. It's all shooters, it's all shoots, but pro wrestling in general, I think, needs to bring back that toughness, because I see they bring some rapper on there, some skinny rapper on there, and he's throwing the Miz around or something. I mean, what the hell are they doing?
He potatoed Cody Rhodes, and Cody didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's disgusting. When I was doing pro wrestling, if somebody potatoes you give them a receipt, beat the fuck out of them. That's what it's supposed to be. And I think that as pro wrestling is got the viewership of it has gone down, as the integrity of it has been completely lost. I mean, when they talk about it being a work and all this, I mean, that's why I'm so happy about Shoot Pro Wrestling and what we're doing. Again, shootprowrestling.com. Check it out. Check out Scientific Wrestling Instagram. What we're doing is great. We're putting the genie back in the bottle. We're taking combat sports back to the future.
There's also that new show coming out called WWE Unreal that's going to be on Netflix this summer. That's supposedly going to take you into their creative room. And I don't think what we need right now in wrestling is to pull the curtain back even more.
We need Vince McMahon to come back. They got to get Vince McMahon to come back as a big heel, with all the stuff going on with him, man. I mean, hell, what the thing that I said this on your show, actually, when I had Renee Michelle in the studio. No, I think it was Gia Salazar, the actress, when I had her in the Berman studio when the Vince stuff was coming out. I said, why in the hell, when Vince got all that money, when they sold the company, when the company went public, right? And he became a billionaire. And he was the biggest heel at the time. Why didn't he just go retire and then come back as a heel instead of running the company and living in? I'm from Connecticut. Who the hell wants to live in Stamford, Connecticut? I could never understand the guy, Hannibal.
He has a passion for wrestling, and that's why I do think he'll be back in wrestling. I hope that it's opening up his own company that's going to be at least somewhat of a change, because I think WWE is too corporate now. I don't think it's ever going to go back unless Vince buys it again, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, Hannibal, I think the Shoot Pro is where it's at. I think Hogan and Bischoff are kind of following our lead in that regard. It's all good. It's all about the shoots, real American freestyle. Wish those guys the best of luck. Again, their rule set is not dynamic and exciting like ours, but I think the way things are today, man, people just want to see the shoots. They want to see the real deal.
Well, I think the real American wrestling will kind of help your brand too, because people are going to start seeing the amateur wrestling on a national scale as a professional sport. And then they're going to realize even more how phony the acrobatic stuff is. I watched a little bit of the World Collides WWE AAA pay-per-view on the weekend. A guy took like a pile driver off the top rope, got up 2 seconds later, did a Canadian Destroyer on the outside of the ring apron, and neither one of those were the finish to the match. I'm just watching this saying, if I'm not a wrestling fan and I'm flipping through YouTube, I'm just going to be like, this is why I don't watch it. It's so
Hannibal,
fake.
You know this as a pro wrestler. You get a lot more fan reaction by doing less. Doing all of this stuff that you can break your neck and kill yourself. It's like a video game. Like fans look at Larry Zbyszko and his pro wrestling career. I mean, he got more heat just taking a powder and working the fans. And that's what I love to do, to piss the fans off, than doing all this acrobatic stuff and then have good, crisp wrestling. I mean, I think, I don't know, man. I don't watch the current pro wrestling. I wish them the best, but I think Shoot Pro Wrestling is where it's at.
And The Rock is unquestionably the most popular wrestler out there right now. He's the highest paid, and he's
still wrestling, The Rock?
He's going to come back again eventually, supposedly. The last match he had was not his retirement match, but he does nothing. There's a good example of somebody that does absolutely nothing, and he's over like crazy.
Because the fans, he's got the fans in the palm of his hand. And that's the thing about pro wrestling, to get the fans in the palm of your hand. Like when I was in Gastonia, North Carolina, and I came out to the ring with the toothbrushes. And I said that I was there to educate the fans and to save the children of Gastonia. And I said, I have a foreign object in my hand. I know you've never seen this before. I had to drive all the way to Charlotte to find these. This, my friends, is the beginning of saving the children of Gastonia. This is a toothbrush. That's how you get the fans in pro wrestling. Your mic work, your skills in the ring as a wrestler, and not all the acrobatic stuff. You break your neck.
Maybe, King, maybe this is going to change everything. We have a new world heavyweight champion, this skinny little guy.
I don't know. Who is that?
You don't even know who it is, and they've made him the champion now. This just happened tonight, apparently. I was just
Who is it? I don't know.
Gunther. That's Gunther.
Oh, but yeah, I'm not familiar with him.
You don't even know the champion now. No. You don't even know the champion. But anyways, that's what the news is in wrestling tonight, and I'll let you guys close this off. King, I know you wanted to share some type of crazy bar story about Jason too. I don't know if you want to wrap up with that.
Wait,
you told me that before, but Jason, I don't know if he wants to share it or not. But
I don't remember. I'm trying to. What story is that? Did I tell you?
I don't know. You told me to ask him about something the last time, and then I forgot to ask him.
What's that story?
Maybe it wasn't that good.
I'm trying to remember.
Where
Jason,
can we
do you know what
follow
I'm
you?
talking about? What he's talking about?
Hell,
I'm trying to think.
Yeah, you're kayfabe in me, maybe.
No,
But
I can't remember. I shoot for a shoot. I can't remember what story. I mean, I got a million stories, but I can't think of what story you're talking about with involving Jay. I will say this though. I will say this though for your fans, and we got to keep it. Keep fans interested in different things. You know, I this Friday I want Jason to come back out because we have the most fun going out on Lake George down here in Florida, Hannibal. We go out on the boat with the lights all and oh man, there's alligators swimming under us. And there are tons of tilapia here in Florida, and they bed in this this shallow lake. And we shoot them with the bow and arrow with a string on it. It's bow fishing, and we go out all night that shoot these things. It's nonstop action. They're so hard to hit because they swim so fast. You got to shoot behind them. But Jason and I hooked a bunch of them, and going back out Friday. And Jason, are you going to be there for some bow fishing action? Maybe we could videotape it for Hannibal.
I have to see, man. I gotta see. I want to tell Hannibal we're out in the boat, and the guide, he says, yeah, we were out here last year alligator hunting, and right where you're sitting, the alligator came in the boat and chewed my buddy's arm off, bit his arm off, and they sewed it back. They took him to the hospital and sewed it back on.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they
As
removed it. Yeah.
as he's showing us a 12 to 15 foot alligator at the bottom in 3 feet of water, he tells us that story.
They bump the boat, Hannibal. These alligators come and bump the boat. I think I had my Derringer. I'm bringing my little Derringer to shoot these damn alligators if one gets in the boat. But we shoot them with the bow. It's a blast, man. It's more like it's fishing, but it's like hunting for fish. And the
Yeah.
tilapia are delicious, man. Jason, tell them about how I cooked them up for you and the wife. Tell them about my wine. I know you're not a big drinker, but I know your wife loves my homemade wine.
Yeah, right. The king can cook, man. He can cook, and he cooked the tilapia up for me and for me and my wife. And his wine he made is delicious wine.
Yeah, you got to come down here, Hannibal, and hang out with us, man. Down in the swamps of Florida, you know that we got wild women and wild animals down here. It's a blast. This isn't like it's not like Miami, man. With it, we're in more of the redneck part of Florida. We love it down here.
I can tell. Well, very good. ShootProWrestling.com. Follow these guys. Thanks for